Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Before we jump into it, I just want to name and send any love to anybody that has been affected or is being affected by the LA wildfires. For those of us that work in climate, know that that is why we're here. So we're glad to have you, but also sending our thoughts and hearts with the folks that are affected, if that's you or somebody that you know. So we'll jump in today, but also knowing that, there are other things that are important that are happening right now in the world. So today we're going to be talking about engaging alumni in your climate action. And before we jump into the content a little bit, as always, there are a couple logistics that we'll go through. You should be able to chat in the chat function. So if you're feeling friendly today, please go ahead and introduce yourself, where you're from, maybe why you're here. The program is being recorded, so after we get through this, we will upload it to our YouTube and send it out to all of the attendees, but then it'll also generally be living on our YouTube if you would like to send it to a colleague in the future. If you have any questions, we got quite a few from the registration, so we'll start with those, but if you do have questions that come up in the meantime, you're welcome to use either the Q&A function or the chat. So some of y'all have been to a couple other webinars in this climate action planning series. This is the 10th out of 12, so we're on our last leg. And thanks for others, for folks that have joined us for others. I feel like it's been a great series so far, and we're looking forward to try to build on to it in the future. If you're interested in information on past webinars, I think there actually was a question from the registration about endowment engagement. We actually had a webinar on that. I believe that was in November, but it was on implementation, or no, it was on financing. So if you want to go to our YouTube channel, you should be able to find that and get a little bit more information about endowments specifically and other topics that we've covered. And we'll have 2 more of these. I'm sure you all got the email or received the email that will be ending before our summit that is slated for February 2nd through the 4th in Washington, D.C. We will have registration open until February 1st, and we have a couple workshops that have recently been added, which are Sunday workshops. So if you've already registered and are curious of what those Sunday workshops are, please head to the website, and we'll be opening the Whova app, I think, next week sometime. So before I introduce the panelists, we generally like to get a little bit of an idea of who is in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll and keep it open for a couple minutes just to understand who you all are and kind of where you're at with your relationship with your alumni office. And yeah, we'll open it just for a couple minutes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it. And so I like to share these just so everybody knows who's in the room, and I'll read through them. So we do have, it looks like, quite a few folks from sustainability staff and facilities, as well as sustainability staff that are in the upper administration. And we love to see a couple alumni relations folks here. That's great. We're happy to have you here. Welcome. And then mostly large public institutions are represented, and as well as about 15 private institutions, which I think is important to note because Haverford is a private institution, so they'll be speaking from that lens. Most of you have a small relationship with your alumni office. A couple of you don't at all, and some of you say that you have one that maybe is a little bit more established. And then about 50% of you have or do your alumni offices offer groups for alumni to connect, whether it be geographic, professional, personal, or other affinity types. And then about 13 of you don't know if you do have those groups. So I think that that'll be interesting kind of moving forward, and maybe Lisa can talk a little bit about that too. So great. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think we're going to, let me close this out. We're going to introduce our panelists just briefly. So I'll have Lisa, Jesse, and Shill come on camera, and then I'll hand it off. Our three panelists today are Lisa Bildren, Dr. Jesse Lytle, and Shiladitya DasSarma. And Lisa and Jesse are from Haverford College, and then Shill is a faculty member at University of Maryland, Baltimore, but also will be speaking from the lens of being part of the MIT, or helping start the MIT group alumni for climate action. So we're going to have two different perspectives here. We'll have one really from the internal college perspective, and then have the perspective from Shill of an alumni that has kind of led the charge to start to get alumni involved with climate action on the campus. So I'm going to introduce Jesse first, and then we'll hand it off to him and Lisa. And so Dr. Jesse H. Lytle has been Haverford's Vice President and Chief of Staff role since it was created in 2012 as an advisor and administrative partner to the president of the college. He is the institutional lead for strategy, institutional effectiveness, and government relations, and performs the governance roles of Secretary of the Board of Managers and Assistant Secretary for the Corporation of Haverford College. In 2013, he became Haverford's first Chief Sustainability Officer and led the development of a multifaceted institutional strategy to engage students and community members on critical sustainability issues, steward the college's environmental impact, and engage with external partners. He has co-authored two strategic plans at Haverford, the Plan for Haverford 2020 and Better Learning Broader Impact Haverford 2030, and is co-leading the latter plan's implementation. And then Lisa joined Haverford College's Alumni and Family Engagement Office in January of 2018. At Haverford, she works with the entire alumni and family community to engage volunteers, connect with fellow community members, and partner with many college offices, such as the Center for Career and Professional Advising, to support Haverford's mission. Before joining Haverford, Lisa held roles in alumni relations, career advising, and admission at Ursinus College, Princeton, and Gettysburg College. She received her master's in higher ed from the University of Pennsylvania and a BA in political science from Gettysburg College. She spends her time off with her husband and two young children, preferably out in nature. As a bilingual and bicultural family, they're always working on new, to Lisa, Turkish recipes and learning new words. So I will hand it over to you, Jesse and Lisa.
Thanks, Cami. This is classic higher ed, like they just started grinding concrete outside my window. Can you hear that?
No.
Okay.
It's not taking over your audio, so I think you're okay. I'll let you know if it gets too bad.
Great. It's right here in my ears though, so this is awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for having us. It's great to be here, and thanks to Lisa for joining me. Hopefully what we have to share is helpful. I'm not going to claim that Haverford brings unprecedented expertise in this work, but we do benefit from great integration between sustainability and our alumni team. In fact, Lisa and I are in the same building most of the time. And so that's let us do a fair amount of experimentation that we can talk about. So let's jump right in. Next slide, please, Cami. I'm not going to read this slide to you, but just to say that climate action can look like any number of things at any institution. And at Haverford, we've really just mined our own mission and the interests of our community. And we've been opportunistic. We have not gone in with a strategic agenda. We have a sustainability strategic plan, we have a climate action plan, but we really look for the happy confluence of what we're working on and what our alums are interested in. And we try to leverage those opportunities when we see them, which is in lots of different ways, as you can see on the slide. Next slide, please. So this is Haverford, just to give you a little context. That's where they're drilling the concrete right now, except it's snowy outside. We're a small liberal arts college just outside of Philadelphia, 1,500 students. We actually have Quaker roots, and that is relevant to this in that our sort of distinctive Quaker-rooted values put student agency at the heart of our educational model. Which is great. Our students take a lot of initiative. And when they graduate, Lisa can talk more about this, they still think they run the place, which is lovely in many ways. You can imagine it's complicated in some ways, but they are very interested in what we do here. And we love capitalizing on that energy to keep them integrated in our work here. Next slide. So when we think about taking advantage of everything alumni have to offer to advance what is our shared agenda in climate action, we think about what colleges want and what alums want. And so from the colleges side, this probably resonates with you. When we think about engaging our alums, it's for a bunch of different reasons. Potentially, we might want their expertise because we've got alums out in various fields, different industries who are out there doing the work, and that kind of expertise is often not represented on our campus. Alums are often really well networked, whether it's in their professional fields or as citizens. They can hook our students up with who knows what, entrees, invitations, funding, just being at the table for various conversations. And that's great because we're often campus bound here. We also love their labor sometimes, that some alums can give money and some can't. Some are just really interested in the work of the college, and that's great too. If they want to do organizing work, if they want to lead communication efforts, we are happy to have them jump in the boat and row with us. So we're always looking to see what it is that the college needs to move our mission forward, that alums might be able to give us. And then from the other perspective, I'm going to kick it over to Lisa, who's going to talk about what alums might be looking for in their relationship with us.
Yeah, and I'll actually just add one point, Jesse. When you were talking about some of the heritage of the college, I do think it further becomes relevant also in who some of our alumni are. So we used to have, well, let me start farther back. There's a tenet within Quakerism itself that relates to environmental care. And we used to have a larger percentage of our actual students who were identified as Quakers. That is a smaller percentage today, but my point is that for a lot of folks, this is their life and the way that they lead their life naturally, which is therefore related to not just their experience at the college, but also very much to the way that they're living their life out in the world today, with or inside or outside of their faith communities, whatever they may be. But a lot of current students today, even if they may not be religiously aligned with Quakerism, they are deeply connected to the mission and the values, of which climate is certainly one of. So what our alumni want, again, is to really learn more in a lot of ways. We have a very curious community. That is true when they are students. That is true the rest of the years. They are not students, but still a part of our community. We also see a very deeply rooted spirit, which I think is true for a lot of institutions, around paying it forward. There are a lot of alums who want to give whatever they can give, and we'll talk about that in a moment, to the students of today, because somebody, whether it was a professor or a staff member or another fellow student or an alum, gave them an opportunity at some point in their personal or academic career. So they want to do that again for the students of today. So we're always just love having those conversations. Social connections also really popular, I imagine, at most institutions. Our alums want to meet other alums, especially across decades and generations, because they would not have had the chance to meet one another across their class years. Our work, of course, being in the alumni office specifically, right, they're students for 4-ish years, but they're alums for at least 40 more. And so they want to connect across those decades, and we love to be able to create those opportunities. Philanthropic impact certainly is something key and essential to the work of the college as well. For our private institutions and those of you on the call who are in those, our alumni offices are embedded within our development and our advancement teams. So therefore, part of that work is also around philanthropic discussions and how our alums and others across the community can support with their dollars and their philanthropic impact. Next slide. So we talk a lot about how we're really in alumni relations, kind of the bridge in a lot of ways between the internal and the external community. So a lot of our alums are in different stages of their own personal life and therefore in different levels of knowledge and understanding about what's happening on campus today. And so a big part of our work is around communication, information sharing, updating folks. A lot of our alums want to know that the Haverford they loved in the regard to the mission and the values still are true today, whether that time was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 50 years ago. So a large part of our work is connecting these threads across many, many years and many, many decades. It's a very long arc, right? They also, again, or we want, I should say, them to be involved in the life of the college and who it is today, which again may or may not look like the college that they experienced when they were here. So there's a lot of continuing conversations and relationship building around who we are today and how that kind of fits into the memory of what their experience was at the college. For some alumni, that's very easy to see, and for others, that's a little bit more disparate. So we have a lot of those kinds of conversations. From our development, advancement, alumni relations side, we often talk about as well how we can engage individuals in their time, talent, or treasure. And what we really mean by that is time from a volunteering perspective. What volunteer roles might make sense? What ways can they engage and learn more about the college today or work with current students perhaps? Talent is a little bit of what Jesse was referencing earlier, some technical expertise or opening a door or making a connection for us or posting an internship at a firm that we otherwise would not be able to have recruiting some of our students. And then treasure, of course, I think is pretty self-explanatory. And this photo is, of course, the opening of a building on campus, but wanting to make sure that that philanthropic impact is also really represented. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we did this is by creating an alumni affinity group. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but in general, an affinity group to us, because everyone has a different definition, is an alumni-facing organization that has a group, whether you want to call it a leadership group or a board or whatnot. We think of them really as committees of somewhere between 6 and 10 individuals that meet on some standing basis to put together programs and events. And our affinity groups range across lots of different identities, but we do focus on identity or professional groups. So for instance, we have a finance organization and a lawyers group, which run a little bit differently than what we consider this group, which is called the Sustainable Fords. We decided that anyone can be a Ford that wants to support broader sustainable efforts, whether that's professionally or personally. This particular group, excuse me, meets regularly with members of our staff, puts together programs and events for other alumni in specific regions, as well as for doing programs and events on campus with current students, whether those are student organizations or career-related groups, along with our Career Center as well. This particular group's been active since about, I guess, 2020, I believe, what's its first year. Next slide. So one of my best pieces of advice, and this is a lot of text, but I would say if you are sitting in a sustainability role on your current institution, is to really reach out and find out what the structure is of your alumni relations development advancement organization. Those of you who are in large institutions, of which I think half were, you have schools and centers that might have their own embedded. Some schools run it all centrally within one unit. Some do it by school and center. Others, if you're public, are also doing private foundations that are separate from the institution itself. So you may have some of these roles happening, or some of these alumni organizations happening within other entities, maybe academic departments or other kind of student life organization groups that span into their alumni time. So I think that's the first question, or the first piece is really getting an answer to this question. How does your institution functionally work with alums on your campus? The secondary question is to find out more about your volunteer programs. My day, every day, is spent talking to people who are not on campus and want to connect to the campus in some way. So my job is to be a little bit of a detective, figure out what the right role is. Is there a volunteer role within our office? Is there a volunteer speaking opportunity in an academic class? Is there a program or initiative that's looking for some support? We also run an alumni board of about 30 or 40 alumni members. They have a meeting on campus 3 times a year. We do a ton of guest speakers. We also run Family Weekend on our campus. We are constantly putting on large scale events and are constantly in need of new speakers. And so I think that's another way where you can lean in. The more you understand about what your alumni relations situation is on your campus, the more you can move forward and think about where the right opportunities are to connect. Fundraising is another piece of that. Again, in our institution, we're really integrated with our direct development staff who are on the road one-on-one, but that may be different on your campus. But learning what that looks like, we're very open to having folks on campus that can help us kind of sell the idea of a new financed project to an alum. But we often need that expertise of what that looks like. Next slide. This is true for alums as well. They often don't understand what the structures are on your campus. If you're looking to organize an alumni group, understanding what alums you can contact. Again, if you're within a school or center at a larger institution, you may only have access to certain slices and pieces of your alumni community, and you don't want to overstep lines. So just, again, learning more about that and being clear. We have found great success in finding a small handful, 3 to 5 volunteers, alumni volunteers, who can really buy into the work we want them to achieve, and making sure that they are across decades, across generations, across other kinds of geographic and other identity groups, to make sure that they have a great way to connect with lots of folks. You also then can start small. Happy hours are easy to put together, not a lot of work, and a great way to involve new people in the efforts. Next slide.
So what did we do with this excellent groundwork that Lisa and her team laid? Here are just a few examples, and hopefully these are familiar to some of the things that you're doing on your campus. An easy one is we have an alum who loves to give money to a student group just to see what they do every year. He gives them a slush fund. They spend it on really cool things. We send him a great thank you note every year. He's totally engaged. And that was actually sort of a gateway gift. This particular alum's engagement led him to be more involved because he liked the impact he was having. And he was then one of the foundational members of the affinity group. So next slide. Lisa talked a lot about the affinity group. From my perspective as a sustainability professional, it's a little bit of cat herding. So you get wonderful energy and everybody's got an opinion and everybody might have a different priority. So if you go down this road, you got to be prepared to give them some time and attention, be ready to set some boundaries about your own time and what you think they can helpfully engage on. and also keep the alumni team engaged, because the alums I've worked with tend to be really ambitious, and they need a lot of support, and there's only so much institutional support we can give them. So we need to help them moderate their expectations. Next slide. And here are just some of the cool things that this affinity group has done. Nothing here that's particularly surprising to you, I don't think, but it's just a nice sort of sampling of the kinds of value added that a group of engaged alums can bring to the community. Next slide. And finally, we had a group of alums decide that they wanted to do something more substantive, and they motivated to join a virtual course. It's actually a Harvard University originally designed course, but it's our working community, there's a lot of sharing. So they created a custom version for Haverford, and we advertised it to our campus and our alumni body. Even though we didn't get a ton of participation, it was a great signal that we are engaged in this work together, and it brought a lot of people out just to be curious about what the college is up to. And it's sort of, we're going to be able to leverage that interest into more of the specific projects that we've listed along the way. Next slide. Handing it back to Lisa for the close.
Yep. So again, a lot of this is about having a starting place somewhere. There's no one place to start, and don't let kind of analysis paralysis get you. I think start somewhere, do one thing, and then build onto the next and the next and the next. And the cadence of that is really up to your institution, your staff, and what partnerships you're able to kind of establish and identify across your campus. From our perspective, everybody on campus owns this in some way and in some capacity, and can support this work in some way, in some capacity. So I see the bottom of the tree, everyone's the roots, right? And ultimately the climate is going to win here, and certainly the colleges and universities themselves. And a part of that is our alums and our students and our faculty, but really all of us together as one unit. And a lot of this really is a virtuous cycle. The more of this you do, to Jesse's point, the more you uncover, which then creates more opportunities to then step into. We also feel that we are leading organizations and efforts and entities, and the more of that the college does, the more our alums do, and then that comes back around to us as well. So again, I think don't let analysis paralysis but get you here. Just start somewhere, take 1 foot forward. And we'll talk more. Over to you.
Great. Thanks, Lisa and Jesse. And I do want to make sure we come back to, because one of the things that we had talked about in our prep session was you were able to get funding for a specific project on campus from an alumni for, I think it was a composting, but that would be really helpful for us to talk. We can come back to that, but I definitely want to highlight that before we leave the webinar overall. So just put a pin in that. So we're going to hand it over to Shil though. So let me do his introduction. So Shiladitya DasSarma is a Massachusetts Institute of Technology alumnus and professor in the University of Maryland School of Medicine, where he serves as the Director of Climate Change, Health, and Society, a new interprofessional course and initiative. His lab specializes in research into the relationship between climate change and medicine and the molecular mechanisms of cell survival with environmental stress. As a proud MIT alumnus, Shil founded with other alumni, the MIT Alumni for Climate Action, aka MACA, and it serves as its president. Among its achievements, MACA has published a roadmap for responding to climate change, which promotes science-based solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. On the MIT campus, MACA provided input into MIT's decadal climate action plan, Fast Forward, proposed an award-winning campus decarbonization plan, and hosted the MIT president's announcement of the $75 million climate project at MIT, which lays out ambitious overarching climate action goals for the whole of MIT. In appreciation for his leadership on climate action, Shil was awarded the Margaret MacVicar Award by MIT. So Shil, I'm happy to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Cami. Thank you for putting this event together. It's an important event, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the audience today. So if you can, so I entitled my talk, MIT Alumni for Climate Action, a Model for Alumni Engagement. And so far we've heard about the process of alumni engagement. And what I'd like to do, if you go to the next slide, is jump right into an example and some of the results. But before I jump in, I just wanted to provide a little perspective. I think I don't really need to tell this audience that alumni are significant supporters of universities and climate action. But I was always so amazed when I looked into this about the number of US voters who are alumni. It turns out that in 2024, about 36% of the registered voters are alumni. And in fact, 43% of all voters are alumni. So they tend to vote more. And it's quite a large number. And we saw Haverford has over 10,000. MIT has over 100,000 alumni. And we like to think of the MIT alumni as successful alumni. And they're located around the US and actually across the globe. And I found in my work with these alumni that many of them support climate action, and not only on campus, but also in the community. And as we've already discussed, alumni contribute quite a lot of money, around $12 billion annually to US colleges and universities. And probably the most remarkable contribution recently was by an alumnus to Stanford, and John Doerr, who contributed over $1 billion and started a new school of sustainability. So that's the dream, I think, of all alumni and alumni offices. So in the next slide, I'll start telling you about our story. MACA, we call ourselves for the MIT Alumni for Climate Action, and we were launched in 2018. And it was really initiated by an email from the MIT's former president to all alumni urging action on climate. And it coincided with MIT's Better World campaign, which raised about $6 billion. So in October of 2018, just before the midterm elections, a small group of us in Maryland circulated a letter urging action on climate. It was signed by 100 alumni in the state. The letter was published as an op-ed in the Baltimore Sun, and it urged immediate action on climate in the state. You can see the headline. And we were quite amazed that there was so much response to that our senators and most of our congressmen, as well as many candidates, wrote letters of support to us for this position. And it ultimately led to the passage in 2019 of an act that mandated 50% renewable energy by 2030 in the state. So after this, in the next slide, in the next few years, MACA grew into a national and international group with quite a large number of members. And we decided to form working groups to bring together like-minded alumni to work toward some specific goal. And these are really fluid groups, but some of the groups include advocacy and policy, some on campus, climate education, others are interested in justice. And there's quite a large number of different technologies. MIT being obviously an engineering and science school has a lot of graduates who are experts in various different technologies, and they like to get together and discuss different types of climate technologies. So then again, MIT requested alumni input on its climate action plan from 2015 and around 2020. And MACA got together, we discussed it, and we sent a letter in October of 2020 to MIT to really ask them to strengthen their climate ambitions. They were not very strong in 2015, but in their new plan, which is called the Fast Forward Decadal Plan, which they released in May of 2021, they accelerated their ambitions, and they wanted to achieve, and I think they're on target to achieve net zero emissions by 2026. So next slide, please. So during the same time, a group of us in MACA were working on a roadmap, because we wanted to have a document that we could take to our elected officials and say, hey, this is important. So we wrote what we think is a readable but fairly thorough document, about 60 pages long with about 200 references, which has analysis and also recommendations for what to do. And those are listed here just very briefly. We're encouraging our representatives to enact net zero or carbon neutral legislation, replace fossil fuels with carbon-free energy, electrify and decarbonize transportation systems, improve the efficiency of buildings and communities, reform land management and agricultural practices, and perhaps most important for MIT is to promote R&D into various technologies, including carbon capture and zero carbon fuels. And probably the most overarching recommendation, which has obviously not been taken up, is that we recommended a climate action authority to coordinate all these different actions. One of the things that we see now in national policy is that there isn't any authority, and that makes it very difficult to really act in unison into this problem. You can read the roadmap. It's the link is there. It's maca.earth/roadmap. Next slide, please. So several other groups got together and wrote other documents. One is a climate introduction for teachers and students, and that's also on our website. It not only describes climate change and its impacts, but also how we can respond as knowledgeable and engaged citizens, which is appropriate for students. In 2023, we wrote a paper on green alternative fuels, especially green hydrogen. And one of the major points of that paper was that we need to look at the emissions over their life cycle rather than just when they're used, and make sure that they're used for appropriate purposes. And then just very recently, we published a paper on carbon dioxide removal, and this is a technology that's very promising, but it has certain concerns that we've also expressed in this paper. So you can see those papers from their link from our homepage. Next slide, please. Another group of us got together and wrote or actually developed a campus decarbonization plan in 2022, which we have sent to the MIT facilities and administration. And this is a plan using district geothermal energy, and it is using available proven technology, and can be achieved in a much shorter time than MIT has given itself. It could be, we could accelerate essentially a zero emissions campus, not really net zero, but zero emissions campus by 2035, and not having to wait until 2050. Okay, next slide, please. So we've done a lot of other things. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll just go through this quickly. So we've met with the Presidential Search Committee in 2022. We wrote them a letter proposing recruitment of climate leader, and in fact, our new president is a visionary in climate action. We've started a dialogue with her. We've also given her some input, and she came out with a plan which is called a climate project at MIT, which is an all of MIT project. And we're very excited about this. Next slide, please. And finally, really, we've done a lot of other types of engagement. We've talked about various types already today. We've had a number of climate webinars and hybrid events. We had an event where our president, Sally Kornbluth, actually announced her climate project at MIT. Also, our vice president, Maria Zuber, who is a presidential advisor. And also we've had speakers such as, very distinguished speakers such as John Sturman and Susan Solomon, other MIT alumni and experts. And we also have panels such as this one with other MIT clubs. There are MIT clubs all over the country and really quite a few places around the world, and other climate organizations such as Second Nature. So in my final slide, I just want to summarize that we think that that MACA is a good model for cooperation to achieve our campus climate and sustainability goals. And I think we've been successful, particularly because we've had regular dialogue with the president's office, the alumni office, our facilities and sustainability office and staff. And these have been done with knowledgeable and passionate alumni. And we also have developed mechanisms for input into the climate action and decarbonization plans. So the campuses have allowed us to have input into these plans. So I would encourage you all to think about how best you can accomplish that in your own campuses. And finally, MIT has talked about the big tent approach, which is that MIT includes alumni as part of the big tent. And so it's not just about the faculty and the students and the staff, but also the alumni. Alumni feel very much like we're still a part of MIT. And so this is an important aspect to make a real impact and to amplify and enhance the campus action on this issue of generational importance. So I'll stop there and hand it back to Cami. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Shil. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and have the panelists come back on camera. And so we'll start. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So if folks have other questions that have came up, please drop those in the chat or in the Q&A. But we'll just start, I think, with Lisa and Jesse. We had a question in the chat. Pretty basic. How often do you host happy hours? And then I do want you to talk a little bit about the project that you've had an alumni engaged in actively and how that came about. And then we'll start there. And then I have a question for Shil.
Sure. So I think I'll just start off by saying first that while it's always a happy surprise if a check of a large amount with many zeros shows up in my office one day, it often takes first getting that alum involved in the institution. So a lot of our work is, again, in partnership, right? The more events, the more programs, the more outreach, the more communications, the more people know what's happening, the more connected and engaged they are, the more likely they are to volunteer, come to events, sit on a panel. And then we all hope that all of that leads to, in the end, perhaps some dedication of treasure as well. So I'll let Jesse talk a little bit about that piece.
Yeah, and the key from my side was to sort of maintain a list of projects, a menu of funding opportunities that were things that I really wanted to do, so that if a check showed up, I was prepared to press go. So in this case, it was a composting project that students had proposed, and we fleshed out a concept, and I put some rough numbers on it. And I have a running list of projects like that, fellowship opportunities, this is and that's, at different price points. And I make sure that Lisa and her team have access to this, so that when they're meeting with folks, you never know where those matches are going to be, right? So you want to give them as many arrows in their quiver as possible.
And most donors that our team meets with are interested in 3, 4, and 5 different things in different areas. So we don't always know who is going to be the one that's going to jump on that piece, right? Because people are people, they're complicated. They have a lot of interests, they have a lot of connections, they have a lot of intersecting interests and identities. So we really highly encourage all of our campus partners to continue to communicate with us about those types of projects, and to Jesse's point, at different price points, because there may be something that $500 could really be transformative for. There are other things that are going to take 500,000, and that's different conversations, right? But the more information our team can have about what some of those things are, that's really, really helpful.
Great. And yeah, it really does sound like the basic entry level is just starting to show up to alumni events and starting to just be present with what they're doing and then building off of that. Shil, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, you mentioned mechanisms for engaging in the climate action plan via MIT. What were those mechanisms? What is that? I don't remember their names at this point, but there were some MIT folks that were joining today that maybe were involved in that. But I'm curious from your perspective, what are those mechanisms? What went well? What could have been done better? What would you have liked to see?
Right. So MIT is a fairly large institution, and with a pretty diverse group of alumni, and so I think it's not necessarily there isn't necessarily a very straightforward way of reaching all of them. So we do have something. I don't know if you've been to MIT, you might know about the Infinite Corridor, which goes through many of the buildings are interconnected, and there's a quarter-mile long corridor in the center of the campus, and the campus has maintained a directory of all alumni for a long time. It's called the Infinite Connection, and so they are able to essentially speak to their entire 100,000, 140,000 alumni directly. So I think that a number of these have been through emails that have been sent to all alumni. And I realize that may not be possible for everyone, but I think that in this day and age, it probably is a good idea to try to develop that type of a mechanism. And then the solicitation of input has been fairly informal. That is, essentially, you can send an email to, or you can fill out this form. And in the case of MACA, because we were a little bit more organized, we were able to meet as a group ourselves and to produce a document that, we sent a 5-page letter that had specific recommendations. So one of the things that we did was we compared MIT to some of their peer institutions, and we tried to point out where there were deficiencies in the plan. We wanted a greater ambition, and I think with regard to the campus decarbonization, which is part of that, part of these plans, it's a matter of how much ambition there is, and so some of the alumni can make a case for a greater ambition that 2050 is not good enough. MIT should be a climate leader, and therefore that date should be 2035. So it's really a correspondence mechanism. There isn't necessarily anything better than that, I think, that I know about, at least.
This is maybe for you, Shil and Lisa, Shil, what is your relationship with the alumni office? Is that who you're regularly engaging with, or is it the sustainability people? And then Lisa, same question, on the other side, what is your relationship with the Sustainable Fords, and how often does that happen? And what has kind of came from those relationships?
Okay, I can go first. So we are in touch regularly with the alumni office at MIT, the Alumni Association office. And we are also in touch with the sustainability and facilities people, especially those folks who are working with them on the campus decarbonization plan. There are 18 different plans that have been proposed. including nuclear energy on campus, which is pretty controversial, you can imagine, in Cambridge. So ours is a geothermal district plan, which we think is less expensive and faster. So those folks have been talking regularly. So we are really in regular communication. We just had our annual meeting in December, and we had the officer who is in charge of the climate plan and is an advisor to the vice president for climate at MIT, was our keynote speaker. And he gave us a lot of details about the climate action plan. So we're really communicating with all of them. And so it does take quite a lot of effort to do this. You know, MIT is, as I said, is a large institution. And there are a lot of voices. And so it's a matter of finding alumni who are willing to make the effort to be in touch with all of those offices. So they're all critical, I think.
Yeah, and our office has a pre-existing system where we staff alumni-facing affinity groups. So for us, incorporating the sustainable forwards was rather easy. Nothing is easy when it takes staff time, but we had a system in place, I guess is the best way to say that. So this particular group meets every other month for an hour with one of our staff members in the group. We plan programs and events. Depends on the year, but our average year, we aim somewhere between 2 and 4 events, whether those are student-facing or alumni-facing. The group has largely done virtual programs, which, to kind of also weave in an answer to a question in the chat, I think it's a really great place to start. The first thing you'll discover when you start talking about alums is, to Shil's point earlier, they live in every state, every country, and every other place on Earth. And therefore, it's so hard to get a critical mass of people on any identity on any given Tuesday night in any geographic location. It's not where I would start. I would start with a virtual program that is a discussion of folks around a topic of interest, or a alumni leader or faculty leader who can speak to something, or yourself as a sustainability officer, perhaps, if that's what your role is, to say, this is where our institution is, this is who we are, this is our plan, this is what we're talking about, this is what we're thinking about. And for alums, again, if they're gone 30 years, they may not know what you already have. So starting really at the baseline, think of yourself as a teacher. What do you need your community to know about who you are? And alums who are interested in that topic will opt in to that opportunity to learn. Then they'll also want to know other alums that are interested and connected and passionate in this space as well. If you do want to do an in-person event, we've seen the best success by doing more informal and casual programs. So not a speaker or a panel event where you come and sit down and you're talked to, but happy hours at any corner bar that are casual and easy, or honestly service projects. In this particular space, we had a group that have gotten together and done several things in different geographic areas that are service to climate nonprofits or other kinds of organizations.
It's really interesting that you staff, so you have one staff that staffs the affinity groups, Lisa?
We have 3 staff who staff 7 affinity groups right now.
Okay.
But the sustainable forwards have one staff person who is their direct liaison.
Okay.
Who is not me. So
Correct.
So that's a really helpful sort of partnership model. So they have somebody in the alumni office who can who knows structurally how well things work. And then when they want to talk shop, you know, I'll fold into a meeting. And so it also allows tag teaming between 2 campus partners and sort of 2, no offense, Jill, 2 adults in the room, just to keep the train running down the tracks.
Yes, Jesse is the expert on what is the campus doing today, what are the long-term plans. We are the experts on how do you get alums in a room, or how do you get alums in a Zoom room to have a conversation that can move forward, and how do you manage a volunteer board, which is its own art and science itself, regardless of what the topic is.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, Jane had a question, and then we'll ask one from one of the registration questions, which is, what is a good first step in encouraging a first step small alumni event around climate action if the Alumni Affairs Office has not seen a strong demonstrated interest in sustainability alumni. Kind of sounds like a chicken versus the egg conversation of how do you get interest if you don't know there's interest, and how do you understand where to find that?
So every institution is going to handle that differently. For us, we have an informal policy, I would call it, where we look for any group of alums to organize events for 2 to 3 years on some level of regular cadence before we'll staff it as a formal affinity group. So all that to say is an affinity group is probably not the first place to start, right? Again, the first step is really those come to this Zoom webinar about this, or come here, this topical discussion, or see who shows up for an event. Because once you've held a few events, then you can start to get an idea of who's really interested, who's really committed, who really has volunteer time to dedicate to some projects and initiatives. The work that MIT is doing is phenomenal, but it's a tremendous amount of time from their personal lives. So the more kind of casual, easy, drop in, drop out kinds of programs and events you can hold, you'll start to get an understanding of who's really committed and passionate to be able to continue to think about building out more formal structures like volunteer groups.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we answered chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
It's amazing how diverse people's interests are. The problem is the same, but different people come at it from very different angles. I think you need to just find people who are, passionate enough that they are willing to lead one of these efforts. But if you just want to get people together, I mean, if you piggyback onto many of the climate events that are going on, like the New York Climate Week or the UN climate meetings, I think those are good catalysts to get people motivated. If you're just trying to get started, that's what I would recommend.
Or if you're doing campus master planning or campus comprehensive planning, any of those types of ways, that's a way to weave it in. We've also done things around the endowment, perhaps. We do an endowment related webinar. People ask about what are our environmental commitments within that, finding ways to lead it across the campus.
Great. Jesse, anything to add? I know you've been very active in the chat, but verbally.
Oh, nope. Lisa and Shill covered it.
Great. I think we've answered most of these questions. Maybe one of them is that we can end with, how do you turn engagement into action? And is there a way to track that action? And I'm not sure that, Shill, that would be your role. That sounds like it would be more of the sustainability staff's role, but do you have any advice of what that could be? And then we'll close it out.
Well, go ahead, Sue.
Go ahead, Jesse. You go ahead.
For me, the key is really relationship building. That, for those of us who aren't alumni relations professionals, the idea of like asking for a gift seems crazy and daunting and awkward. But I think that's really the last step, and Lisa can speak more to this. It's if you have a genuine relationship with the person and they understand your needs and what you're working on, the action, whether it's a gift or a volunteer opportunity, is just a natural extension of that trust and familiarity. So it's all about the relationship building as the catalyst, in my experience.
Yep, I agree. I think a lot of it is like education is first. Engagement in some capacity, coming to an event, attending some meetings, writing a page of the beautiful documents the Chills group, we're putting together. And then that last step, hopefully is potential philanthropic impact or connection to others with philanthropic impact. So it, again, may not be the person, but they may know someone who has a family foundation, or they're connected to some other kind of entity that may have additional funds, corporate or otherwise, that can be repurposed and redirected to you. So also it's not just one-on-one dollars. We also talk a lot in our world about it's not just current dollars of today, but also people's estate plans, their wills. What do they want their long-term legacies to be? Those are often large gifts that folks may have at the end of their life to be thinking about. And there's folks on our team who think about that all day long, but one's impact sometimes is posthumous, but those conversations can happen today.
Shill, anything to add?
Well, I just was going to echo what Lisa said earlier, her alliteration, time, talent, and treasure. I thought it was wonderful. And, different people are going to have different different things to contribute. And I think you just have to identify what people are willing or able to contribute. And I think then you'll translate it into action.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for your time. I think it was a breadth of information that hopefully it landed with people. I think what I've learned or continue to learn and know that it's all about relationships, right? And so making it not a transactional relationship and just about being curious about what the other office is doing or what the other colleague is doing on your campus, and then building it from there versus, hey, I want to figure out how to get a large donation for a new living building on campus or something like that. So that makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, yeah, appreciative again of your time, Shalisa and Jesse. And yeah, we hope everybody stays safe and has a good weekend. We'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.